I wonder what my lady would say. I wonder what my lady would say. I wonder what my lady would say.
Hello, my name is Malerie. You're watching GCTV. I'm here with the State Representative of Massachusetts, Natalie Blais. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
No problem. What made you want to become a state representative?
That's a great question. I never really knew that I wanted to be a state representative. I had worked for a lot of people behind the scenes for a number of years, and I got into public service because I wanted to help people. People who were having problems with government. I found that I was able to help them in this job, and so when my predecessor, Steve Kulik, decided to retire after more than 20 years of being a state representative.
Really, that long?
It was a very, very long time. I decided to step out from behind the scenes and run for office. And that was, oops, I've already managed to mess this up. That was a big jump for me.
What is the most important part of your job as a state representative?
It's a great question. I think the most important part is really being out in the community and talking with people about what is important to them, because I can't do my job well if I am not talking with people about what's important to them. It's probably the most important thing that I do in order to make sure that what I'm fighting for in Boston actually reflects the people that I represent here in the 1st Franklin District. And that's over 43,000 people.
Wow.
It's a lot. It's a big district. It's over 450 square miles. It's the largest geographic district in the Commonwealth. So I try to make sure that I'm out there as much as I can, listening to people about what's important to them.
How do you make laws for our state?
So there are over 6,000 bills introduced every legislative session. And a legislative session is 2 years long. So we're just in the beginning of the first year of our 2-year legislative session. Every bill that is introduced has a hearing where a group of legislators listen to testimony, feedback on every bill that comes before the legislature. So if you like a bill, you can talk about why you like it and why it should move forward and be passed into law. If you don't like a bill, you can also say, I don't like this bill and it should not move forward or be passed into law. Or you can say, I really think that we should change this bill and then move it forward. And the changes that I would like to see are this, 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 and this. So after it has a hearing, the committee will decide to move it out of committee or not. And then it'll come to the floor of the House for a vote. And then the Senate has a turn at it too. And if both the House and the Senate pass it, then it goes to the governor for signature.
That's
It's
cool.
quite a long process.
Can you explain how a bill becomes a law?
Yeah, it is a long process. We want to make sure that we're hearing from people, that we're getting public input and public feedback so that we can incorporate that into whatever bill is coming before the committee. For example, tomorrow, I've offered about 40 bills this legislative session that I'm trying to get signed into law. Tomorrow, one of those bills is having a hearing. So I'll be driving into Boston to talk to the committee about why I think it is important for this particular piece of legislation to move forward, why we need it.
What do you think is the biggest issue in our region right now?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. We're working on so many different things. I guess right now I would say that education funding is the biggest thing that I'm hearing from constituents about. Just this morning I was at a Ways and Means hearing at UMass Amherst where we were talking about education funding. What we know here in Greenfield and across the entire district is that many of our schools are struggling financially. And that means, not only are students, families, teachers struggling, but we're also seeing school boards and select boards, really working hard to figure out how to stretch every dollar as far as they can.
How do you listen to what people in your community need or want?
So I try to be out and about as much as I can. We have office hours here in Greenfield. We have them at the Senior Center every month where people can come in and talk with me about what's on their minds. We also have coffee hours at places throughout the district so that people don't have to travel far. You know, I want to make sure I'm coming to people rather than making people come to me. And I do something that is a little interesting. I do office hours at transfer stations. So where people are bringing their garbage, everybody has to bring their trash and recycling to these transfer stations. So I do tours of transfer stations to meet people where they are, because everybody has to bring their garbage somewhere.
What do you do if you disagree with other representatives?
I think it's important to sit down with them if possible and have a conversation. A lot of times right now, people try to take the easy way out and just shut people out and not have a conversation when there's a difficult topic. So if I have a disagreement with somebody, I try to reach out to find out, you know, where the differences are and where we might be able to come to common ground.
How do you decide which laws are good for the people of the state?
Well, I rely on the people that live in the 1st Franklin District to give me feedback. That is really important to me. It's important to hear from people who are invested in this process and might have an opinion on a particular piece of legislation. So generally, just because I try to be out in the community as much as possible, I hear from people about pieces of legislation. But if they haven't met me in person, then they know that they can call or email to let me know how they feel about a bill.
Can you tell us about a law that you helped pass?
Yes. If you remember, not last summer, but the summer before, we had a lot of floods, and it really impacted our communities and also our farms. And what we found was that Massachusetts was one of only 2 states in the nation that did not have a disaster relief fund in place. So when emergencies like the one that we saw in 2023 hit, there was no money automatically in place to be able to provide the support that our communities or our farmers needed. So Senator Comerford and I introduced a piece of legislation in the fall of 2023. Governor Healy liked the legislation and actually put it forward in her budget. And we were able to create a disaster relief fund for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which I'm extremely proud of. And it is a direct result of what we heard from people on the ground, what they needed. You know, whether it was a town or a business, we heard from them, we introduced the legislation, and we were able to pass that bill into law.
How do you help people with disabilities?
It's a great question. So in all of our offices, we have people whose job it is to take calls from people who are experiencing difficulties with state government. So if you were to run into an issue where there wasn't accessibility or something along those lines, or even just building awareness about ADA compliance, then you could reach out to our office, and we have somebody available in our office to be able to help.
How do you work with people from other parts of the state who might have different ideas than you?
That's a good question. So, believe it or not, there are as many representatives in Boston representing the entire city of Boston as there are representing the 4 counties here in Western Massachusetts. So 4 counties have the same number of people that are representing one city. So it ends up, often being a conversation of what's important to rural communities versus what's important to urban communities, and trying to make urban communities understand the challenges, the very unique challenges that we are facing in rural communities in Massachusetts.
What is the best part of being a state representative?
I'd say the very best thing is being able to support the residents that I have the honor of representing. I'm very, very lucky. The fact that I live in a place where people care about one another and share the same values that I do makes it an incredibly special place. And I feel very, very lucky to represent this particular district.
What is the hardest part of your job?
Driving to Boston. Sometimes driving to Boston can take me 2 hours. Sometimes it can take me 4 hours. So, if I drive in the morning and I need to be there for 10 a.m., I usually have to leave by 6 a.m. to make sure that I'm there for the 10 a.m. meeting. And then you're in meetings for the day, and then you have to drive home, and that is anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. So after having worked a full day, you're also in the car for an additional 4 to 8 hours sometimes. And that is a little bit difficult.
Oh, wow. How do you make sure that you are fair to everyone, even if they have different opinions?
That's a good question. When people call our office, we never ask what party they're from. We don't say, are you a Democrat or a Republican or an independent? We just want to hear from them. And so we take in all of that information, and if there's a particular bill that they're talking to us about, we make sure that we write down what that person feels about the bill so that we can keep track of how many people are for it and how many people are against it.
How do you learn about what is going on in our religion, the state, and the country?
So first thing in the morning, as soon as I wake up, I read the Recorder, I read the Gazette, I read the Boston Globe, New York Times, and CNN. First thing, before I even get out of bed, so that I know exactly what's happening in the region, in the state, and locally. And that is a routine I have gotten into so that I can make sure that before I even get out of bed, I know what's happening in the area.
How do you spend your time when the state government is not in session?
I spend more time being out in the community because I'm not having to drive back and forth to Boston. I'm able to be in the region more, attend meetings, attend events, and just make sure that, as I said, I'm really out there in the community talking with people about what's important to them, and really making sure that I'm really focused and centered in on what's important to them when I'm working in Boston.
What are your plans for the future?
Well, we've just started this 2-year session, so I'm really working hard to get these bills across the finish line. As I said, we have about 40 bills, and we have a lot of bills we have education, we have climate bills, we have bills related to sexual and domestic violence, and bills around agriculture. I'm now the chair of the Agriculture Committee, so that is another piece of work that I've taken on this session, is to look at the around 60 bills that come before my committee to determine which ones are going to move forward and maybe become law, and which ones need a little bit more work.
What advice would you give to someone who wants to become a state representative one day?
I think first of all, I think it's important to point out that there have been, since Massachusetts legislature came into being, There have been 20,000 men who have served as state representatives. 20,000. There have been 241 women.
Wow.
That's a big, big difference. It is a really big difference. And so, first of all, I think that we need to have more women serving in government. And, whenever I meet with women like you, I say, would you consider running for office? And I ask women to do that because it takes a woman, I forget if it's 6 or 8 times, to be asked to run for office before they run. And so I ask people like Malerie, would you please consider running for office to be a state representative or be on your local select board or your school committee or whatever it happens to be. You're already involved in so many things, but you could run for office too. And you could be involved in one more thing. I know you're so busy right now, but it is important to have women in government. It's important to have people like the two of us at the table as we're making decisions about how our government is run, whether it's local government or statewide office. You could run for governor.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the questions.
No problem. And thanks for watching GCTV. See you next time.